Lord, whatever you're doing in the season, don't do it without me. Hello, family. We are continuing with our Acts series, and today we are landing on chapter 23. And if you remember, at the end of chapter 22, Paul was brought before the Sanhedrin, and now he is standing in front of the High Council and he's about to address them. Let's go. Gazing intently at the High Council, Paul began, "Brothers, I have lived before God with a clear conscience." Instantly, Ananias the high priest commanded those close to Paul to slap him on the mouth. But Paul said to him, "God will slap you." So Paul said, "God will slap you, you corrupt hypocrite. What kind of judge are you to break the law yourself by ordering me struck like that?" So we saw previously that the mob was triggered when Paul mentioned the Gentiles. And now here the high priest is being triggered by Paul saying, "I have a clear conscience." So they were triggered by that. And I don't think Paul meant that he was perfect. But in response, the high priest then orders that Paul be struck or be punched, which goes against Jewish laws that say that if you punch somebody, you are then in essence punching God. So you wonder how somebody who is in that high position would be able to give such a decree to be done upon somebody. But I think such things, they reveal somebody's heart. Because here you are saying you are representing God and you are for God and you are for the law, but yet you are breaking also the law. Those standing near Paul said to him, "Do you dare to insult God's high priest?" "I'm sorry, brothers, I didn't realize he was the high priest." Some scholars are saying Paul said this because he had bad eyesight, so he didn't recognize who was talking. Some say he could have possibly also been sarcastic in this moment. But Paul replied, "For the scriptures say, you must not speak evil of any of your rulers." So we get it that Paul really didn't mean it, and he was being respectful, and he was showing that it's there in scripture that we are supposed to respect those who are in positions of authority. And it also goes to us also that we respect those who are in positions of authority or those who rule over us. Paul realized that some members of the High Council were Sadducees and some were Pharisees. So he shouted, "Brothers, I'm a Pharisee, as were my ancestors, and I'm on trial because my hope is in the resurrection of the dead." So then Paul realized that these were two separate groups who had their own differences, but they had come together, banding together because both of them were anti-Jesus. So the Pharisees believed in the resurrection and the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection. So Paul then brings it up to bring confusion amongst the camp. This divided the council, the Pharisees against the Sadducees. For the Sadducees say there is no resurrection or angels or spirits, but the Pharisees believe in all of these. So there was great uproar. Some of the teachers of the religious law were Pharisees, jumped up and began to argue forcefully. "We see nothing wrong with him," they shouted. "Perhaps a spirit or an angel spoke to him." As the conflict grew more violent, the commander was afraid that they would tear Paul apart. So he ordered his soldiers to go and rescue him by force and take him back to the fortress. So when he planted these seeds, Then now the Pharisees were now coming now to his defense. It's just funny how things can change in a split second if you ask or you plant the right seeds. And I just believe that it is just by divine inspiration and wisdom that Paul then came up with this, that, oh no, if I mention that my hope is in the resurrection of the dead. By the dead here, he was meaning Jesus Christ. That his hope is in Jesus Christ, who died and who rose again. That night, the Lord appeared to Paul and said, be encouraged, Paul. So it means Paul was having a moment of discouragement. And I believe that because of how things have planned out, because before he had wanted to preach to the mob, but he couldn't. Now he wanted to go and preach before the high council, and he had failed to do so. And his mission was to go to Jerusalem and be able to preach to the guys there, but he hasn't been able to do that. So he was now in this moment of, he had a moment of discouragement. And as I said it before, I like it that the Bible includes these pieces of very vital information. So even for us, when we go through those moments of discouragement, we are able to be encouraged in a sense. Paul, just as you have been a witness to me here in Jerusalem, you must preach the good news in Rome as well. Say, God, you have been a witness. You have done the job here in Jerusalem. And now God continues and said, this is not the end. There's still more work that we are supposed to do in Rome. So you can imagine these words coming to somebody who is very zealous for the Lord, a faithful servant of the Lord, that just encourages him and lifts him up. They're like, oh, wow, really? I've always wanted to go to Rome. So finally, his dream of going to Rome now is being realized, not on his time, but on God's timing now. So you can just imagine God saying to us, be encouraged. I like other versions says, be cheerful. And Romans 8 tells us that all things work together. Let us read it. And we know that all things work together to those who love God. And I like it that it puts a disclaimer there that all things work together, not for everybody, but for those who love God and to those who are called according to his purpose. Those are the ones that things work together for good for them. And we see now things here working together for good for him. That everything that has been going, you can imagine going from the mob, now you go to the high council. Yeah, there will be those moments of discouragement. But as we remember before, God had told him that I am with you. The next morning, a group of Jews got together and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. There were more than 40 of them in the conspiracy. They went to the leading priests and elders and told them, we have bound ourselves with an oath to eat nothing until we have killed Paul. So you and the higher council should ask the commander to bring Paul back to the council again. Pretend you want to examine his case more fully. We will kill him on the way. So just for them to be approaching the high council with such things that they want to kill somebody who hasn't been found guilty of anything, and that they feel comfortable to approach the high council with this idea, and the high council actually accept this idea. It shows you the hearts of the men, that even though the men are claiming to be for God, that the men themselves are corrupt, that they are for themselves. Other versions say that Paul had actually referred to the high priest as a whitewashed wall. Whitewashed wall actually meaning that it means to have covered up dirt or some other thing. A whitewashed wall is a dirty wall. That is what Paul actually referred to the high priest as a whitewashed wall, that you are corrupt, that you have covered yourself with white, but you are dirty. And we see the corruption here among these leaders who were claiming to be for God, that these guys, even the commitment of these guys, that these guys committed themselves that we're not going to drink, we're not going to eat until we have killed the Lord. The level of devotion that some people can be devoted to corruption, that it consumes them, and they are willing to do whatever it takes to fulfill that evil that is harboring in their hearts. May God have mercy. But Paul's nephew, his sister's son, heard of their plan and went to the fortress and told Paul. And I believe this is also just God's divine protection over Paul, that when this was being discussed, his nephew was there and heard what was being said. Paul called for one of the Roman soldiers and said, "Take this young man to the commander. He has something important to tell him." So the officer did, explaining, "Paul the prisoner called me over and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you." The commander took his hand, led him aside, and asked, "What is it you want to tell me?" Paul's nephew told him, "Some Jews are going to ask you to bring Paul before the high council tomorrow, pretending they want to get some more information, but don't do it. There are more than 40 men hiding along the way, ready to ambush him. They have vowed not to eat or drink anything until they have killed him. They are ready now, just waiting for your consent. Don't let anyone know you told me this," the commander warned the young man. Because the commander knew that Paul was a Roman citizen and he was entitled to his rights. And we are thankful that the commander was able to maintain a level head in this situation. Because I feel even the commander, it was easy for the commander to just do as the high council wanted. But yet the commander held his position and did his job well with integrity. That even for us in our positions of power, of influence, let us do our jobs well with integrity. And let us not suppress people that we are supposed to be looking after. So we see it here with the commander, that because the commander knew that this man is a Roman citizen, he's entitled to his rights. I'm not going to trample on his rights because there are certain people who hold certain positions who want him killed. That is not correct. So I'm a man, I'm going to walk in integrity. Then the commander called two of his officers and ordered, "Get 200 soldiers ready to leave for Caesarea at 9 o'clock tonight. Also take 200 spearmen and 70 mounted troops. Provide horses for Paul to ride." Not just a horse, but provide horses and get him safely to the governor Felix. So Paul had a heavy escort. That if there's these 40 guys, let us provide him. How many are there? 200, 400. So there were 470 soldiers who were protecting Paul, making sure that Paul would arrive safely in Caesarea. So this is just God's divine hand upon Paul, that God was even using this commander to protect Paul, to make sure that Paul arrived safely, because as we have been told, Paul has an appointment in Rome, and that has to be achieved. Then he wrote this letter to the governor: "From Claudius Lysias to His Excellency Governor Felix. Greetings. This man was seized by some Jews and they were about to kill him. When I arrived with the troops, when I learned that he was a Roman citizen, I removed him to safety. They took him to their high council to try to learn the basis of the accusations against him. I soon discovered the charge was something regarding their religious law, certainly nothing worthy of imprisonment or death." So this was nothing worthy of imprisonment. This man is not supposed to be in prison. This man was not supposed to even be killed. But yet we see the high council here, that the high council were even ready now to kill this man. Wow. But when I was informed of a plot to kill him, I immediately sent him on to you. I've told his accusers to bring their charges before you. So that night, as ordered, the soldiers took Paul as far as Antiparis. They returned to the fortress the next morning while they mounted troops took him on to Caesarea. So they took him to Antiparis, and when they had now felt that, okay, now we are out of the dangerous zone, we can now go back and some of the troops can continue with the journey. When they arrived in Caesarea, they presented Paul and the letter to Governor Felix. He read it and then asked Paul what province he was from. Cilicia, Paul answered, I will hear your case myself when your accusers arrive. The governor told him. Then the governor ordered him to keep in the prison of Herod's headquarters. Some would wonder, since this man had failed to kill Paul, were they now dead? Had they kept their oath to not eat or not to drink until they had killed Paul? I would like to believe that they had broken their oath and were busy enjoying somewhere. And I think what I like and what I want us to take away to that is that we be encouraged. That the Lord tells Paul here that there is more that is waiting for you. You are in this situation now, but believe it, that there is more that is waiting. That there is a Rome that is waiting for you. There is more. There are more people to reach with the gospel. There are more people to pray for. There are more people to feed. There are more people in prisons to visit. There are more people to clothe. That child of God, wherever you are, there is more. There are more ways that we can serve the Lord. There is more for you.